Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I'm not sure what happened yesterday. I just lost my internet completely, but I'm just hoping it will be good today so that I don't experience the same thing. Yeah, so I'll just give a quick recap of what we majorly did yesterday and where we stopped, and then afterwards we're going to be doing what's expected of us, in this case the advanced queries in SQL. That's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so yesterday we started by going through our installation process, checking on it, and then after we are done with download and installation, we said we have two pop-up window of SQL that opens. One is the SQL shell and the other one is SQL workbench. We are going to be working on the workbench for one reason: it's more easier to work around with and get to the running of code still also easy, as compared to the SQL shell, which is more of a command line. Everything that you need to work with, you have to key in the commands to access it, whether it's a folder in your computer, whether it's an already existing data set. You have to write a line of commands to get it. On the other hand, we have the SQL workbench, whereby we have a tab for opening any the SQL file in our computer and the data set, and we are able to work with it on that note. Yeah, so it will be much easier to work around with. So to open a workbench, I'll just come to my search bar here, type my SQL. You'll see my SQL shell command line, and then we have the workbench, and we said we're going to be working with the workbench. So I just click open, and it opens the SQL. Yeah, and what opens is the SQL welcome window, whereby we have a welcome message to my SQL workbench, and then sorry, let me just delete this. Just a minute, let me just delete this. I don't know, my computer just began misbehaving. That's disappointing. Okay, hello. Okay, I'm just having a key problem. I don't know how to solve that, but what I'm saying is that anytime you open and get this welcome message, you're going to have the first local instance connection area here, and then with this local instance connection, what you're supposed to do is click on it, and it asks for the password if it's the first time you're opening it. So you key in the password, and then you can go ahead and click to save the password, so that you don't keep on re-entering it anytime you're using the SQL workbench. Yeah, and we also added on how to create a new work connection. Here we're having my SQL connection. We have a plus button here, where when you click on it, you have a pop-up window. You give it a name, you give your work connection a name. You can go ahead and click on the password area, where we have store in vault, so that you key in the password as well, the one you created during the installation process, and you can test the connection. yeah, before you begin, so that if it's successful, then you can go ahead and click OK to create the connection. If it is not successful, that means you have to review your probably your password or so. Then so I'll just click on my route where we did our work. That's on my SQL workbench area. And what we did, we were able to create a schema. So by default you'll have the sys schema, but that's the database. We use the create database command to create a new database, and of course you give it a name. Ours we called it class. To see the list of database existence in your work, you can just click on show databases and you can have a view of it. We also have the use database, and majorly we said that this helps so that you, anytime you run a command, you won't get an error that no database is selected. Yeah, so you must either run use command to select the database that you want to work with. For example, in our case, this says, which is dark and bold, is the current active database. So if I create a table, or I create insert any values, they'll be created in the sys database, which will be the wrong thing doing. Bearing in mind that I'm creating a table that I want to exist in a class database. So you can either use run the command use class commands, or you can just double click on it so that it's highlighted. So let me just run use database, and now you can see the class is the one that's highlighted. So if I create a table, it will be created in the class database. We ran the command for creating a table, and the most important part here was that you run the command create table for creating a table, and then you give the table a name, a unique name. Every table must have a unique name. Then thereafter you key in the column. Things to note: anytime you are creating a table, you must identify the data type for the column. We said we have three categories of data type: numerics, string, and date and time. Yeah, on the string we had character, which has a fixed length. We have a variable character, which has a variable just a variable length, and it contains, of course, characters, numbers, and special characters, text, numbers, and special characters. The same for variable character, only that the variable contain a fixed length. On the numeric we had integer and float and double for decimals. Then we have date and time, whereby we have date and time in different formats. So on to our today's class. The last command we ran here, this helps us to have a view of our student table. For example, if you want to see all the columns within our table here, that's student, we run the command select all. Asterisk means all, so we're selecting all from students. Yeah, that's on what we did yesterday. On our today's work, I'll just open a new SQL file, and we say that to add a new SQL file, you can just go to file, you click on new query tab, or you can just click on the first option where you have new SQL tab to add a new SQL file here. Yeah, so
sorry, Lucy.
Yes.
Good evening. You said which one between the two? The first or the second one?
The first. The second one is for the second one is for opening an already existing SQL file script. So to add a new tab, you click on the first option, or you can just go to file and click new query tab.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me just go back to another.
Hi Lucy, I have
Yes.
a question as well.
Yes.
Yesterday you mentioned that the commands are not case sensitive.
Yes.
Are the names of tables, databases case sensitive? For example, class with a capital C, would it be different from the class you've created there?
Okay. When I talked about case sensitive, I specified keywords. Keywords, these are terms that already exist in Excel. Those are the ones that are not case sensitive. And I mentioned about being caps and being lowercase. On the terms of the word, let's say name, it's much case sensitive. And I used an example whereby, okay, let me just use a different in terms of case. I'll just write students in caps and then run that. Yeah, I'm getting the output. But if I type student, which is just a little bit different from the already existing, and run, what I get is, okay, sorry. I don't know how I'm going to manage this, but I believe I will be able to do so. So if I type a word that does not exist in SQL, it might be in terms of the name. For example, I'm having students and I have student. Yeah. So what I'm getting is an error because it says can't create sorry. It's did I run the first option? Make sure you run using the second option. I'm getting an error for creating. I guess I ran the first command whereby it's running everything, and of course you can't have a database that's duplicate. So let me just run that. Yeah. Sorry for the mess. So what I'm saying is that in terms of name, okay, I'm so sorry for this. Okay. In terms of the name length, it matters a lot. Yeah, and we have said that there's a difference between class and classes. We have different students and students, but as you can see, when we run the command line students in caps and students the same name in lowercase, we're getting the specific exact output. Yeah. Okay, I just hope this will stop. I don't know how, but it should. Okay. I hope I answered your question, Matthias.
Yes, you did. It means that names of databases and tables are not case sensitive.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Just go back to the.
Sorry, then Lucy.
Yes.
So then again, the difference between the two flashes, the ones that you use to execute.
Okay.
So what is the difference again?
The difference I said is that if you execute using the first flash button for execution button, this first option, it executes everything within that whole SQL query tab, which is not recommended, especially if you have commands that have already been executed. If I run the first one, using the first one, I'll get an error because create database class, the class database already exists and you can't create a duplicate. And we say that we choose the second option because it executes where your mouse is or the line where your cursor is. It just executes that line of command. So you're able to execute each line at a time using the second option. We'll come to see where we will be using the first option, but anytime you're going to be running until I let you know the first one, we're going to be using the second flash button. Yeah. Okay, and to our notes, we have we're going to be working on advanced queries. In this case, constraints are rules. So SQL constraints are used to specify rules for a data in a table, as we're going to be seeing. So you can create a constraint. You're going to be seeing different way of creating a constraint, especially when we are creating a table. Remember, we created a common table, whereby we created a table, and in this case we say that it should contain this number of columns. On the other hand, we can add a rule whereby, for example, the first column ID, it should be unique. It should not have a duplicate. If I insert values into this student table with duplicates, it will be possible. But if you don't want duplicates, that's when we come to adding constraints, the rules, whereby probably you don't want duplicates, you don't want empty values keyed in, and so on. So I'll just go to this next SQL file, whereby we are going to be doing constraints. So you can just use the dash and then use space. We say this comment, adding a comment for a single line. So what else?
Sorry, Lucy. Sorry for taking you back. My query, the first one, the first SQL file, I don't have the class. What do you call it now? On this other side, on the schemas, where the sys is.
Okay, we said that you can refresh the schema area using these two arrow or motion like arrows, or you can just right click and then refresh. Yeah. So I'm just adding a comment, and the comment is constraint and then I'll hit enter. That's how we add a single line comment, so that line won't be executed. And then we're going to be creating a table, and on this table we're going to add rows to it. For example, you can have an ID whereby every ID should be unique, so you have to add a role to that. So we're going to run a command create table normally, just the way we did yesterday. We have create table, and then you give it a name, create table, then the table name. We can call it employees. We are giving our table name employees. Then we can open the brackets so that we key in columns. You open the brackets so you can start by adding the columns. For example, you can have employee ID. You can just call it emp underscore. Remember, we said you use underscore to separate two-word name. So we have employee ID. We say this is an integer. This is an integer. So we're going to add a rule to this column. In this case, our employee ID, whereby we don't want this column to be duplicate, neither do we want it to be empty. So every employee must have an ID and a unique one. So the command for that is called primary key. So we're just going to type primary key. You'll see the pop-up primary. It's a two-word, so we'll just have primary and key. So we are creating a table employees. We are having employee ID. It's an integer, and we are making sure that this employee ID is not empty, and neither is it neither is it null. It's not null and it's not duplicate. Okay, probably I can go ahead and just give a simple definition of a primary key. So a primary key is a constraint that uniquely identifies each record. Remember, we said a record is a row in a table. Yeah, so when we talk about ID making it primary key, we means that we are making it one unique, so that every employee, if you want to know an employee according to their ID, it is unique and it is not having any duplicate, neither is it empty. Okay, let me do something. I don't know. Yeah, let me just go back to the notes and show you something. Back to the notes, we have my constraints here. I'll share the notes. We're having the constraints that are available, that are mostly used in SQL. So we have primary key. It's a combination of not null. Yeah, so someone can say they don't have ID. It should be there. And then unique. That's why we are saying it uniquely identifies each row in a table. That's primary key. We have foreign key. It prevents action that would destroy links between two tables. So we're going to be using foreign key. It is uniting or reunion. It's a key that's used to join two tables. Yeah. For example, I'll give an example as I did yesterday in our class. Before we come to that, you can have a class type of data table and the instructors table. Yeah, so that you're able to retrieve table from these two tables. You want to retrieve from data from these two tables, you must have a foreign key that's joining these two tables. Yeah, that's the case. Then another thing to note, a foreign key is a primary key of another table. So if I add a foreign key, let's say in the lecturer's ID, it should be an already existing primary key in the student's table. We're going to see that. Then we have not null, ensures that a column cannot be null. We have unique, ensures that a column values in a column are different. Then we have check, ensures that the values in a column satisfies a specific condition. Default, sets a default value for a column in a no value if no value is specified. And lastly, we have create index, used to create and retrieve data from a database very quickly. So we're going to be learning how to use some of these constraints as we move on. So currently we are running a primary key. Yeah, we're running a primary key, and in our primary key we are going to make sure that, for example, our case here, employee ID is unique and not null. Okay, so after adding the primary key that's on the first column, you can go ahead and create a second column. Let's say first name, first underscore name. Yeah, of course we specify the data type is a variable character type of data type, varchar, it's a varchar type of data type. Yes.
Excuse Lucy.
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Can we have more than one primary key in a table, or it can just be one?
You can have more than one. I'll show you how to add them. Other than adding primary key to each of the column, I'll show you in a few how to add if you have multiple primary key.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a first name. We have said it's a varchar. Of course, we specify the length. Let's say 55. Yeah. Then we can add also a rule to first name, that every employee must have a first name. There are people who don't key in their names, they just key in their, let's say, ID and other details and leave out their first name or their other name. So each employee must have a first name. So to add a rule to this, you just type the rule that you want. For example, remember, names cannot be unique. There are people who have a common name, but to make this column so that it is not empty, we're going to use not null command. Not null constraint. Yeah, then you add a comma. So not null means that every employee must have a first name. We can add a last name. Let's say last name, last underscore name. It's a variable character data type. Okay, let me specify the length. Let's say 100. Of course, it's always good to give a wide length so that anybody who comes with longer names, you won't have to go and modify your table. So that's on last name, and probably we can add age. Age, we say it's an integer. Yeah, that's all. So we are creating a table, and in our table we are making sure that we are adding some constraints, and we say that constraints are rules, and our rule is that every employee must have an employee ID and it should be unique. 2, they must have a first name, and then we have last name and age, which doesn't have any rule. Yeah, so I'm just going to close that and then add a semicolon. So if I run this command, I'll create a table with these columns, and any entry that we're going to be, as we learn how to insert values, you run, you'll see what's affects if a certain rule is not met, what happens. So I can run that. Sorry, I can run that. We said we're using the second execute button, and we have created our table successfully. Yeah, we remember we talked about beautifier tab here, where we have a brush like icon. Let me see whether it affects, it's going to navigate our area here. So I'm selecting this line of command, and then I click on beautifier. See what happens. Sorry for this. Sorry. See what happens. It rearranges our work in an orderly way. Yeah, whereby you can able to go through your work and understand it easily without just looking key into each row. And you can see it I've also capitalized our line of commands. Yeah, so let's see on how to have multiple primary keys. If you have more than one primary key, how to go about it. So we're going to create also a table using the create button. Create table command. Create table. Hello. Yes, I saw. Yeah, I saw it. Okay. Okay, sorry for that. I hope I'm audible. I'm saying we are running a command, create table, then we give it a table name. Yeah, let's give it a name employee. I'm just going to make it unique. Employee. We have employees, so I have employee without an S. Remember, we have said there's difference between the two. That's on create table name. Then of course now we can go ahead and key in the columns. So I'll just open a brackets, have the first as employee ID, so you can just type emp underscore ID. It's an integer, so I'll just type integer, add a comma, The second one is first name. First name, first underscore name. It's a variable character. Then the length, of course, let's say it's always good to have long length of name. Then we have last name. The type, data type is a variable character, and then the length, let's say 200. Yeah, so these are our columns that we are adding into our area here. I'll add the last column, let's say city. A city is a variable character as well. And then the length, let's say 100 as well. Yeah, and of course make sure you, okay, we haven't closed our brackets yet. So after that you add a comma. So we want to specify that we need constraints in our table. In this case we have more than 2 primary keys. That's why we are at this point. So we're going to have first command of giving a name to our primary keys, because you can have a list of them, and then we can go ahead and now list them down. So this is how we do it. We're going to use the command constraint. Constraint, okay, we're writing constraint. Constraint. Okay, I'm missing some letter here. Yeah, constraint. Yeah, that's our first command. Then we give our constraint a name. Yeah, in this case the name that you are writing here is going to be a group of a name group for all our primary key that we're going to be listing. Yeah, so let's say we call it primary key employees. We can just say pk for primary key underscore employees employee. This is the primary key name for the list of primary key that you're going to be listing. Then you can go ahead and type primary key, primary key. Yeah, and on that note open brackets, and then you can list all the primary key that you want to have. Remember, we have said we are starting by typing the command constraint. This helps us to give our constraints or our rules here a name, and the name is pk employees for primary key employee. And then because we need a primary key, you type primary key, and then we can go ahead and have a list. We can have emp id. Make sure you type the names that already exist in the column. For example, if I want primary key to be our employee id, I'm supposed to type what is in our area here, emp underscore id. Yeah, add a comma. You're not going to add anything, you just give the name of the column. Let's have first name as a primary key as well. Yeah, so you can have a long list at this point of all the columns that you want to exist as a primary key. Then after you've listed them, you close the brackets. First we have closed the bracket for primary key, so you have to close another for closing the first brackets where we started employee id integer. So we are supposed to have double brackets. I hope we are together. Then you can go ahead and use semicolon. Just to give more details to that, we have created a table called employee. It contains employee id, And with employee ID, it's an integer. We have first name, a variable character. We have last name, variable character. City, a variable character. And then we're going ahead and adding rules, in this case constraints, more than one. That's why we are using constraint, giving it a name. Then because we want to add primary key, we list them just next to primary key. Yeah. So we can go ahead and run our command. And it was success. You can see here it is successful that we have created a table called employee, and our constraints are primary key, two of them, employee ID and first name. Yeah. Is anybody having a question on that? Okay, I hope we're all good. Okay, I hope you can hear me as well.
Hi, Lucy.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just have a question in line 3.
Yes.
Let me just take you back to line 3. How did you come with that iteration?
Of the alignment of this command, line of command.
Yes.
Okay, what we did, we are selecting the line of command that we have. Then we are using our brush like icon here. It's called beautifier.
Okay.
Yeah, and it beautifies your work. It makes your work look consistent, well to view and understand, and so on. Yeah. And it's most helpful, especially if you have a long line of commands. It will be very helpful. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay.
Lucy,
Yes.
I'd like to ask the last line, the constraint PK underscore employee. So that name PK employee is the name of the constraint that we're giving for this these columns that want them to have the primary key.
Yes. This area here.
Okay.
Yes.
So the name for all that is the PK underscore employee.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's on primary key. Of course, you can delete a primary key that already exists if you are not okay with it. Yeah, you can do away with it. Of course, you can add if it doesn't exist. So let me just show you how. If you want to add a primary key, I'll go back to the previous table we created yesterday where we have a class. Yeah, remember this table doesn't have any primary key, but you can add a primary key to an already existing table. Remember, you can't recreate a table unless you do away with it, you delete it and then recreate it. Otherwise, you can't create a duplicate table. For example, create students and add primary key within it. But you can make changes to this table and add a primary key. For example, the ID column. This is how we go about it. Use the command alter command. Alter, we said yesterday, is used to modify. In this case, what we're modifying is our table. So we alter table. We are making alter to the table, and the table name is students. Yeah, sorry, students. And then the next command that follows is add. Sorry, I'm used to using caps. So we have alter table. The table name is students. We want to add something. What are we adding? Primary key. So you add primary key, and then you open bracket to specify the column that you want it to be a primary key. Of course, you can have a list of them, but we want just ID, So I'll just open ID and close. So I'm making changes to the students table, and what the changes I'm making is adding a primary key, and the primary key column is ID. Yeah, so I hope that's clear. Let me just click enter and add something. If you want to add multiple columns, just the same way, you'll go alter, and then what you're making changes to is a table. Remember, you said you can alter a database. That's why we specify what we are altering. In this case, the table. The table name is students, and just the same way we added multiple primary key, that's the same way we are going to be doing here. So I'll add the command add, but other than typing primary key, I start with constraint command, so that we give it a name and then go ahead and write list primary key names. So I start with constraint, give it a name, let's say PK student, primary key underscore student. Yeah, then we are adding a primary key. Yeah, and then you can list now the primary key. You can have ID, comma, first name.
Martin, sorry, Lucy.
Yes.
A question.
Yes.
Do you still have to add ID yet on line 6 you already added? Like if you are, let's say you already had the primary key as the ID, the first one.
Yeah.
Then later you discover, okay, you want to add more. Do you have to still add ID again?
No.
Yes, like now first name.
No, you don't have to add it. You don't have to. I haven't ran this line yet. I haven't ran the first alter table student add primary key yet. So I just wrote it down, and then we have alter table student. If you want more than one primary key. Otherwise, if for example ID already existed as a primary key, I'll just add, let's say, first name and probably age or any other column that follows if you have multiple. Otherwise, if you had an already existing primary key and you just want to add one, you use the first line of command. If you want multiple, I've said if you want to add just one primary key, you use the first line of command, whereby you use alter student add and then primary key and then the name of the column. Otherwise, if you have multiple, we're using the second one, whereby you're giving a constraint name, primary key, and the list of the primary key that you want to exist in your table.
So let me understand again. Sorry. So if we had executed line 6, so line 7 wouldn't add ID. We would just add first name and age, for example.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is anybody else having a question on the making changes or modifying a table in terms of adding a primary key? Okay, I hope we are together on that. On the other hand, you can delete a primary key. I'll just delete, write the command here. Okay, let me just run a command whereby the line 6, where I'm adding, making changes to students table and adding primary key, in this case ID. I run that. Sorry for that. So we are running, not closing, sorry. So I'm running that, and it was a success. And probably I realized I don't want column ID to exist as a primary key. Yeah, you can go ahead and remove that primary key, and this is how we do that. You run alter table, but remember we're making changes to the table as well. I'll alter table, and then the table name, which is students. And now what you do now is not adding, we are removing. And this is because we are not removing data, we are removing data from the table. we use drop. Remember, I made the difference between delete. I'll share the notes so that you can review on that. The difference between delete and drop. Yeah, so you have a command delete and you have a command drop. I'll make sure I share the notes. I hope I won't forget. So we have drop, and then what are we dropping? Primary key. Yeah, we are dropping primary key. If it was just one primary key, you can just run as it is. For example, we just have ID, and we it's only ID that exists as primary key. We can go ahead and just run alter table student and then drop primary key. Otherwise, if it's a list of primary keys and just want to delete one, you can go ahead and specify the column that you are deleting primary key from. I hope we are together. Just in case, you can go ahead and let me know. Let me just go back to the notes. So that's on primary key. So next is the constraint that we're going to be looking at is foreign key, and we have said that a foreign key is majorly a constraint whereby it prevents action that would destroy links between two tables. So a foreign key constraint is used to prevent action that would destroy a link between two tables. So probably with an example, we're going to understand what is a foreign key and when to expect this foreign key. So back to okay, let me just note here. A foreign key is a field or a column. Remember, this is a field is a column in a table that refers to a primary key in another table. Yeah, for a key to be called a foreign key, it must be a primary key of another table. So we're going to be doing that using our already existing table. So okay, let me just go back to where we had our previous tables. So we have these tables. We can go ahead and use probably the second one, employee. So we want to create a second table. Yeah, and this second table, we want to include a foreign key. Yeah, we want to include a foreign key to it, in that the foreign key is a primary key of another table. So the table we're creating will be a linkable this table here called employees, and to be for that table to be a foreign key, it either be ID number, employee ID, or first name. These two, because they are primary key already. For them to be foreign key, they must be primary key of another table. Okay, I hope that was noted. So let's create a table. Create table, then table name. Create table. We can give it the name, let's say salaries. Salaries. Yeah, and with the salaries table, we are going to add columns, of course. Yeah, we're going to start when we have just one foreign key, and when you have multiple foreign key. Yeah, so we can have one, let's say what will have salary, of course, is our first column, and salary is an integer. Then add a comma. I'm trying to think of what you can have in the salaries table. Okay, let me just have two columns. One is salary, and two, what we're going to have is emp ID. temp underscore ID, and this is an integer as well. Yeah, that's an integer as well. So what will happen is that we can have for example, in our case, we have employee ID. I hope I wrote it well. Yeah, we're having employee ID, and this employee ID is a column that already of course exists into another column. That means these two tables have a common column. You will get this when you come to joins, why we need a common column. But these two tables, now we are creating the second table, it have a common column with the previous one. But we want to make a rule that this employee ID should be a foreign key, bearing in mind this foreign key must be a primary key of another table. Yeah, so I'll just add a rule, in this case foreign key. Let me just add a comma there. We have foreign key, you can see it pop up here, just disappeared. Yes, we have foreign key, and then you specify the foreign key. So I just open the brackets. The foreign key here is employee ID. That means this is a column from another table. That's why it's called foreign, because it's from another table. So we have employee ID, and then the command that follows is, where is this employee ID coming from? Yes, we know it's from the employee table, but when you're creating a table, you must indicate where this ID, you're giving it a foreign key, where is it coming from, using the command references. You'll see it pop up, references, you space, then it's coming from the table employee. You type is employee. Make sure you type this table name well, correctly, employee, and then the column is, you just add the brackets, emp ID, emp underscore ID. Okay, I hope I'm audible. I hope you can hear me well. So I'm closing the first bracket for closing employee ID column, and then closing the second for closing the table column section. Okay, let me just confirm something. Hello Paul, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. So let me just take you through the same command. We are creating a table called salaries, and this table contains these columns. We have salary and employee ID. These are the two columns within the table. On that note, we are adding a rule. In this case, we are adding a foreign key into our table, which will link up this table to another table. And the foreign key in our list here is employee ID. So you're making sure you mention it within the foreign key area. The reference command is used to refer to where is this foreign key coming from. We are referencing it from employee table, emp ID column. I hope we are together. We are referencing these two, employee table, emp ID column. That's how we create a foreign key. Is anybody having a question about a foreign key? So I can just run this. Yeah, it was successful. You can see it's a success here. So we have created a table. Okay, let me just modify it, beautify it rather. Yes, looks better that way. So we have created a table called salaries. It contains salaries, column and salary column and employee ID column. But the rule here is that this employee ID is a foreign key from employee table, so we reference this to employee and the column is emp ID. I hope we're together on that. That's how we add a foreign key when creating a table. Remember, we have said you can add a foreign key to an already existing table, but in our note here we are creating a table. Yeah, so what happens, if you want to add multiple columns? You make sure you use the command constraint. You go ahead and give it a name, let's say foreign key, and then you specify the foreign key columns, and of course you have to use the reference. Anytime you have to use the reference. Yeah, and just the same way we use the alter command to add primary key, that's the same way we use foreign key to add a foreign key to an already existing table. Yeah, so probably you might be having an already existing table and you want to add a foreign key to it. You use the function alter table. You alter table, and then the table name, in this case we can have salaries, and then you can add to it using the add function, add foreign key, add foreign. Yes, we are adding a foreign key just as we did with the primary key. You open the brackets and specify the foreign key. In this case, let's say ID, because that's the only foreign key we have. So we have emp ID, emp underscore ID. This means when you're doing this, it means that emp ID does not exist as a foreign key. Then you use the references, and where is this column coming from? Employee table. Then you specify the column, emp ID. This is when you are adding a foreign key to a table that already exists. You can of course drop an already existing foreign key if you don't want to work with it. You can go ahead and drop it using the function drop. Alter table, the table name, other than adding, you drop to do away with the foreign key if you don't want to go ahead and work with it. That's it about foreign keys. Anybody having a question about foreign key? Okay, I hope we are together. So you can just go ahead and take a shot.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Just explain again that line 26.
Okay, line 26, what we are doing, we are making changes. For example, I've said we are assuming that the emp ID does not exist as a foreign key. Yeah, so that's when you're making when you're using alter, it means that we are making changes to an already existing table. Yeah, so we are running alter to make changes, to modify a table, and the table name here is salary. We are using the add function, and then what are we adding? A foreign key. And the foreign key, you must specify the column and where it is coming from. That's why we're using the reference. You realize the command line from here to where we added the foreign key is the same as here. Yeah, only that in our first command line we are adding foreign key when creating a table, In the second line of command, we are adding foreign key to an already existing table. That's the difference. Is that okay, Sandra?
No, I'm not getting something. We already created the table salaries, and we have salary and employee ID, and the employee ID is a foreign key because we're getting it from the employee table, right?
Yes.
So then I get on line 26.
Okay, this what's happening. Okay, this is what happening. This is what is happening. What I'm doing in line 26, I'm assuming that that column is not there.
Oh, you're assuming like from 19 to 23 is not there?
Yeah, like I'm adding, I've created a table which has salary and has employee ID, but because I want employee to exist as an employee, as a foreign key, that's why I'm running now this line to add a foreign key to this table. Yeah. Yes. Okay, we can just take a short break of 10 minutes. So we are back here at 9:20 so that we can finalize on our today's class. Yes.